I see that we're live now, Richard.
Right, okay, that's good. Yep. Over to you,
Okay.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. This is Revolving Investment Fund Committee. Before we start, apart from our welcome to members of the public, councillors and those on this call, as we've discussed, it would be fantastic to just for a few seconds show our solidarity with those who are outside now, which is where we would be, clapping to show their appreciation for the life and work of Captain Sir Tom and as well as the wider NHS. Thank you. We won't subject the public to a minute of that, but I know our hearts are in that same place. So thank you all very much indeed, and thank you for public if you are listening or if you hear it later. So a welcome to everybody, public and councillors and others. This meeting is being held remotely in line with the provisions of the regulations introduced by the government to enable local government decision-making meetings to be held remotely. The meeting is being broadcast on the council's YouTube channel. The meeting will also be available to view on the council's YouTube channel afterwards. Councillors and officers taking part in the meeting are requested to mute their microphones. Please activate the microphone when invited to speak and turn the microphone off again when you're finished speaking. Visiting councillors, members of the public and officers not taking an active part in the meeting request to turn off their cameras until they're invited to speak. Please indicate to speak by using the raise hand facility, and if I miss that, Richard, I know you'll help me. Let me introduce myself. I'm David King, Cabinet Member for Business and Resources and the Chair of this committee. I'd like to invite members of the Cabinet present to confirm themselves, introduce themselves, starting with the Leader of the Council.
Good evening. Thank you, David. Councillor Mark Corey, Leader of the Council and Ward Representative for Wivenhoe.
Thank you. And the Deputy Leader.
Good evening, Julie Young, Deputy Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Performance, the Local Plan and Culture.
And third, and certainly not last, other than in order, Councillor Teresa.
Hello, I'm Councillor Teresa Higgins. I represent Newtown and Christchurch, and I'm the portfolio holder for commercial services.
Thank you very much. Let me invite the officers in attendance to introduce themselves, starting with Ian Vipond.
Good evening. I'm Ian Vipond, Strategic Director, Policy and Place.
Thank you very much, Ian. And Matthew Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew Brown, Economic Development Manager at Colchester Borough Council.
Thank you very much. And the Democratic Services officers who make this happen, Richard Clifford.
Thank you, Chairman. Richard Clifford, Lead Democratic Services Officer.
And Matthew Evans.
Good evening, Chairman. Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I don't think we've got any others present at the moment. If they are, then they need to show.
I don't think there's anyone else, Chairman.
Thank you. That's fine. Item 2, Richard, urgent items.
There are none, Chairman.
Item 3, substitutions. We know the answer to that. None. Item 4, declarations of interest. I know you're all interested in the subject and what we do, because it's fantastic stuff for the now and the future in terms of Colchester. But are there any with a declarable relevant interest, in particular disclosable pecuniary interest? Because if so, you will be carted off by Richard Clifford and parked elsewhere. No. Okay, well, that's great. Minutes of the meeting, item 5. We had a great overview of a great capital programme last time we met, describing and walking through key developments, including Northern Gateway, and that's captured in the minutes. Is that record acceptable to everybody? If it is, please just show by raising your hands. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Richard, item 6, have your say.
There's nobody registered to have your say, Chairman.
Okay, then in which case we go to the main order of business, which is item 7, which is the Queen Street Grow On and Digital Hub facility. Just a few remarks, and I'll hand to invite Matthew Brown with Ian Vipond's support as needed to talk us through this. I mean, it's fantastic to be close to the edge of a decision on the future of another part of our town that needs regeneration. And I hope the images we see tonight will give us a sense of that. I've asked that we have a look at that. It's been a long journey here. We're not quite home yet, even if we commit tonight. There's not yet complete certainty, but it's fantastic that we're on the edge of a decision, and we have high hopes that it will be a positive one. Another really welcome and non-controversial step in regeneration in that part of the town. Matthew, I'll invite you to walk us through your report. And we've all would have seen it, but I think I'd like to bring out for those listening the key points you want to make, and then I shall invite members of the committee to say what they feel is necessary or to ask for elaboration or clarification. So over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Councillor King. So I'm going to start, before I talk about the scheme and its benefits and consultation, I'm going to actually invite Richard Clifford to, if possible, put the slides on the screen, because I've just got about 5 or 6, 7 slides, because it's nice to show these things visually. It's nice when you're talking about a scheme just to see it. So Richard, thank you. Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. So I'm going to just talk at these slides and explain what they are, and then ask for the next slide as I go along. So what we're highlighting here, this is the site. So if you look at the black rectangle just to the left of the centre of the screen, that is the site of the former Eastern National Bus Garage on Queen Street. You'll see the area behind it in shaded red is the student accommodation scheme. That's a different development. So we're just tonight focusing just purely on that, on the front of the site facing onto Queen Street. So that's the building. That's currently the former bus garage, and that's where we're going to be building a new grow on scheme, hopefully. So Richard, if you could just move us on to the next slide, please.
No.
There we go. Okay, so here we have a view as it looks today from the front, from the Queen Street side, at the top of the screen, and then below that you have sort of an aerial shot looking down on the scheme from the Priory Street side, and you can see the current former old industrial buildings, which are the former bus garage buildings, in the context of the buildings around them on Queen Street. Just highlighting that red shaded area, that's the development boundary for the grow on scheme. So kind of ignore the area to below that on this drawing, that on this photograph, that's not in scope of the new building. That's the adjacent development. So thank you, Richard. Next slide, please. Okay, so the site has had a lot of uses. What we're looking at now is the Theatre Royal, which was on this site until around the 1930s. And around the 1930s, it was then demolished and then became the bus garage site. But so the point is worth sort of mentioning, there was a building here of this scale and size back then. And this design, obviously quite a large Georgian fronted building, quite a sort of prominent building on this site. So one of the considerations now is to make sure that we kind of we sort of reflect and echo the style of the buildings around the proposed scheme, so that it matches into its context. Thank you, Richard. Next slide, please. Okay, what we have here on the screen now is kind of the design journey, which is still developing as we speak. It's still going on to get from early concept drawings and designs of a grow-on facility, and I will come on to explain what I mean by a grow-on facility after these slides, right up to kind of near final designs of the building. And as you can see, as you move left to right, it gets slightly more advanced, and it blends in better with its surroundings, in its keeping and its environment. Bearing in mind it's quite a sensitive environment in terms of archaeology, heritage and history, and the conservation area. So as you move to the right of that slide, you're looking at more recent, more up-to-date designs, getting close to a final version, which will ultimately go to planning committee next month. Okay, Richard, next one, please. Okay, so what we have here, and I just need to sort of stress that these are not final versions. These are illustrative, so they're getting there, but they're not quite final. But what we're trying to show here is this is the front elevation from Queen Street, showing you the building in its context. So you're looking at the buildings, the Georgian buildings to the left and right of it. 2 buildings up the road, you're looking at the 37 Queen Street Business Centre, former police station. And what you're seeing here is they're just trying to make that building fit its surroundings, fit the design and the style of the surrounding buildings. But this is getting close to a final design, and you're looking there at a 3-storey building with studios and space over 3 stories, and an entrance to the right, which is a kind of double height passageway which leads you through this building into the development behind it. So that's just to set the scene of the, you know, sort of near final designs. And then the next slide, please, Richard. Thank you. And here we're looking from the rear. So this is the equivalent shot, but this time this is an artist's impression from the rear of the building, from what will become John Bull Square, showing again that entrance, that passageway, which now is on the left, which will go through the building onto Queen Street, and sort of the glazings of the back of the building. On the ground floor would be a cafe, and then obviously studios and creative space above that. You can see there the gabled design of the roof and a mansard roof on the front. So this isn't the final version, but this is a kind of an illustration of where it's going and what it will end up looking something like. Thank you, Richard. Next slide, please. And what we have here is an artist's impression from within that double height walkway, which will go through the building, leading from Queen Street right through to the rear. And the cafe will face onto this, it will front onto this, and it will be just a nice, wide, accessible, friendly, safe space for people to passage through the building to the rear. And that's just an artist's impression, it's not a final design. And then the next one, please, Richard. Thank you. This is the final slide. This is an impression only, and what this is showing you is the building in its context. That isn't the final version of the building. That's, as you would have noticed a couple of slides ago, the design has evolved since this was done, this illustration. But all it's giving you is it's showing you where that sits in relation to the skyline, the buildings around it, the Roman wall, the Roman bastion, and Vineyard Street car parks. It's just for context, just to show you where this is in terms of that skyline and what that will look like roughly when completes, although noting that the building will be different to the one you're now looking at. So thank you, Richard. That's my last of the slides, but I've obviously now gone to talk about the scheme. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll continue. So a little bit about the background, most of which I've covered already, a little bit about where we are now and the opportunity for this scheme, the benefits of the scheme, and then I'll hand back to members. So as I mentioned previously, the site was a bus garage, then a theatre, then a bus garage. It's got extensive Roman archaeology, a former Roman road running underneath part of the site, the Roman wall to the rear of the site. From its former use as a bus garage, there's obviously contamination, and it's flanked by large buildings either side. So it's quite a difficult, quite a constrained site. So then coming on to work that was undertaken in 2018. So business case work, feasibility work was done to establish potential future uses for this site and this scheme. And what they found was that there are no commercially viable uses for the scheme in the sense of residential, commercial, etc. It's just so difficult, such a complex site with so many constraints. What we did find was that the use as a space for the grow-on businesses in the creative and digital sectors of the economy, subject to getting grant funding, would in fact be viable, noting that this sector of the economy has seen growth. It's seen strong growth, actually 10% growth in the years immediately prior to the pandemic, and over 600 businesses in the Colchester area in this sector, which is promising, it's exciting. And what we've also found, and it's been tested very recently, as late recently as October 2020, was that this sector of the economy is actually showing strength and resilience in the face of the pandemic. There's a strong and emerging tech sector hub in Colchester, of which creative and digital forms a key part. And we have confidence, and we have tested that even with the pandemic and the effects on the economy that we're seeing currently, this is still a viable scheme. It's still a viable business case. And the overall presumption of this business case is that you have business incubation space, not here, but 2 doors up the road at 37 Queen Street and other incubators. And those businesses, as they grow and expand, they have a space to grow into, which is still relatively affordable for them, relatively straightforward space to move into. It's curated, it's looked after, but it gives them that chance to establish themselves and get slightly bigger and grow in those key sectors. And there's a shortage of this type of accommodation in Colchester, and there has been for a long time. And that's been recognised not only by the Borough Council, but by partners, South East Local Enterprise Partnership and Essex County Council. So it's an established need, it's a long-standing need, and it's something we really need to have soon in our town centre. And it also forms an important part of the economic recovery and building back new facilities to encourage growth after the pandemic. So just a little bit more on that final part of that. We've got an opportunity to bid now, and we are bidding for a £3.77 million grant from CELEP, South East Local Enterprise Partnership, under their Local Growth Fund programme. We have the next meeting, the Accountability Board meetings on the 12th of February, where this scheme will be presented, along with a number of other business cases. If we secure the £3.77 million grant, then we really have a really good chance of doing this scheme, and again subject to a successful planning application, which is due to come to planning committee on the 4th of March. Alongside the £3.77 million, we also need a match funding, which is obviously in the report. It talks about that. So it's a time-bound opportunity. We don't have long. We only have this one shot at this grant money, and as I mentioned previously, this is a commercially viable use with that grant. However, other uses are not. There's no other commercially viable uses for that site if we're unable to secure that grant for this use. And then sort of finally coming on to consultation. So there's been consultation on this scheme, including a public webinar, which Councillor King, Councillor Young and myself presented with other colleagues in November to describe this scheme and talk about the future of the building and its uses. And we had some very positive feedback from that, from a range of people, generally positive about this is a good use, it's a good thing to bring forward this type of employment space in the town centre. And then just finally for me, just to summarise some of the key benefits of the scheme, and then I'll close. So we're looking at bringing forward at least 760 square metres of high quality working space. That's significant, and especially in this part of the town centre. It will complement an existing cluster where you've already got the 37 Queen Street Business Centre, and there's the strength in this sector, as I've mentioned. So it actually produces 86 jobs. It creates 86 new jobs during its economic appraisal period. And additionally, you'll have at least 8 jobs, probably a lot more, in the construction phase, 8 construction phase jobs, wider benefits to the sector, the construction sector, whilst this scheme is being built and developed. As a key site in the town centre, it will play a very important role in regeneration. It's been a sort of empty site, empty building for some time, for some number of years. It's in a prominent location. It backs up the strategies of CELEP and ECC in terms of promoting space for new businesses. Another thing to mention is its active and sustainable travel infrastructure. It's very close to the bus station, the railway station, existing and planned cycling infrastructure, which will pass right next to the site, the rapid transit, which will come very near the site, and so on. So that it won't create, it won't create extra car journeys. People will predominantly be able to travel using sustainable travel and active travel to reach the building when it opens, which is fantastic. And it's also something we've noticed during the pandemic is that there's more of a preference for people wanting to work locally and work in local centres and local hubs, as opposed to travelling a long way away to a distant office and commuting. It's complementary to other wider funding and wider investment. We've hopefully got our potential town deal bid and other investment going on from the council and partners in Colchester, to which this will complement. So this will actually form a really key part of that wider regeneration and wider investment programme. And it provides a statement of intent for local people and local businesses that this is really going to drive and promote opportunities for local businesses to grow and to expand in Colchester. And that's all for me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's tremendous, Matthew. It's a very succinct, very informative capture of, and I have to say, an excellent paper. We await, obviously, the process, but we absolutely know how hard you and others have worked to get us to this position. Before I go to Councillor Mark Corey, and then Councillor Young. Just one question, which I know all three of us will be particularly interested in, is to ask you for a bit of elaboration around the consultation. From my perspective, having sat in on a couple of these sessions, they've been absolutely, as we would want them to be, very open, lots of Q&A, a free flow of ideas and thoughts, some which we've been able to take on board, like looking at the interiors in terms of design and how they might take the history of the site and reflect it in some sort of fashion. And I saw what we would consider to be, you know, key local figures who have a very keen eye for detail and design and the fit of the buildings, and that moving design we understand is not quite there yet, but I understood it's been adapted to a degree in terms of profile. So could you sort of just walk members and those listening or watching later through the nature of that consultation, the statutory bodies, to the extent we know where they are, and how and the sort of the feel. To me, it seemed very positive, but I think it'd be good to say out loud who we've talked to, what views we got back, and what we've been able to take on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to start that briefly, so as we said earlier, we had that that consultation, that webinar event that we held late November with yourself and Councillor Young presenting, and we invited, obviously it was a live event, so there was a live question and answer board, and then we had a survey which ran from that point for a period of time for people to then respond offline, and that generated quite a lot of interest. I think there were over 20 people actually responded into that. There's just examples of positive feedback and comments that we had. Colchester Civic Society, we're very pleased to see it, and they saw it as a positive development for that part of town. They saw the importance of getting the design right and the importance of the thoroughfare to the rear of the site. Colchester Creative Board, again, very supportive in terms of the sector and the growth of the creative sector, and the importance of investing further into infrastructure to help that sector grow, and recognising the strength of that sector, and it's going places, and it's important to our economy, and seeing this as relevant to them and relevant to the existing 37 Queen Street building 2 doors up the road. And then sort of the final part of your question, other consultees, clearly our planning team and Historic England. So we've been working closely, myself, Alison Fogg, the project manager, and the architects, Inc. Pendowney, working closely together over the last couple of months and beyond that, in terms of refining the design in terms of making it just right, making it reflect the immediate vicinity, the strong heritage, the views, the aspects, getting it right. So that's an evolving journey, and that we're not completely there yet, but it's moving very, very well in the right direction and getting more positive feedback. We're awaiting a formal response from Historic England, but that's in hand. They're just awaiting some final CGIs from the architect before they can put in their final submission to us.
Thank you very much. And I know that that's include ward councillors as well, which is important. One of the things we've learned from some of our challenges before, and I say it to my fellow members because it's true, is open discussion early in a listening way, engaging those with particular knowledge and of both the architecture, the style, the history, and also the place. I think this has been done well, and I sort of thank you and your colleagues for it. I'll go to Mark, Julia, and Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Matthew. That's excellent. I've actually got quite a lot to say, so do forgive me. As leader, I get involved in almost every project and make sure I've got updates on them, but this I haven't seen for a month or two, and it's fantastic to get this update, and you've done it in a really easy to understand way, Matthew, and sold so many of the positives, which are genuine positives. It's not that we're glossing over things here, it's genuine. The participation involved, the consultation is really, really good, and I like the scheme. I like the look of it, I like the flow of it. I agree with the Civic Society's views on it. That sounds really positive as well. So thank you. This is amazing. So I really like how the designs are portrayed. I like how it's in keeping, but actually really improves on the current scenery down in Queen Street. The access to the wall, I think that's a really good walkway through. I think that's going to make so much more of that whole site and the adjacent site. You talked about the sustainability. I think that's fantastic in terms of travel and connectivity to the building. I just wanted to ask one point about the sustainability of the build going forward. As you know, I'm passionate that we make sure we future-proof going forward, really decent, sustainable building design and environmental credentials. So maybe a bit more on that, please. In terms of, I just wanted to check about more designs coming out, because you said some of them were not ready yet. So I'm just excited to see more and the final designs as they come out. So please do share them. I know David, as the business representative on the council, speaks to businesses a lot, as do I, and Grow on Space is exactly what they talk about. That mix from we know we've got incubation units, but actually that slightly larger Grow on Space is exactly what we need. So it's great that we as a council are delivering this, and we lead by example, and hopefully others will follow. So that's great too. It was interesting to hear that you talked about the growth that continues in the creative and digital sectors. I know we've always been good in Colchester at incubating and supporting those. I was pleased to hear that you've done some of that market testing to see, even in COVID, how that is going. And I suppose one more question is, what changes do we see post-COVID that we are building into this? I know that changes. We know people want to, instead of going into London or into offices elsewhere, they want to stay locally but still have a bit of connectivity with others. Please just add a bit more about any research we're doing or going to do on that. Just a couple of final points. Could you just reiterate, so it's very clear to us and the public, what the grant timescale is and what the planning timescale was? I think I heard the 4th of March for planning, and any further consultation dates as well. But overall, great job. Really good to hear. Really good to hear so many positive contributions from other partners and interested parties. So you're doing a good job. Thank you. Thank you.
Perhaps, given that's quite a long list, Matthew, you might pick out the 2 or 3 questions. Grateful. Thank you very much, Mark, for the overview. That's absolutely spot on. And then we'll go to Julie.
Thank you, Councillor King. So thank you, Mark. So just some quick responses to that. Sustainability of the building. Yes, it will be sustainable. It's still fairly early days. We haven't got as far as the technical specification yet. We will soon. And when we do, clearly, yeah, we will absolutely make it as green and sustainable, as energy efficient as it can be, meeting all current standards. So that is coming. That will definitely come. Final design, clearly that's ongoing as part of the planning application. So that will be in the planning portal. Any latest drawings and so on will be in that. Changes post-COVID, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's more of a hybrid model of working. It'll be a combination of home working and people wanting to go to local hubs. We're looking at what that is. We're actually researching that now as part of the broader team. The economic development team are looking at that to make sure that we're absolutely providing something that's future-proof and is going to be relevant to Colchester. But what we have seen during COVID-19 is people wanting to use their local centres more, using their town centres for more frequent, more trips for different reasons. So it's that diversification or full diversification of uses, which this kind of scheme helps us to deliver. And that's useful. Finally, on timescales, the grant timescale, we go to set up accountability board on the 12th of February. They won't be able to give a full approval because it's subject to planning. And as you said, the planning committee date is the 4th of March. So as long as we are close to, the planning date, they can give an in-principle approval. The grant, there's no absolute rigid time of when that grant has to be spent by, but if this all goes according to plan, we'd probably be looking to get to construction in this summer of 2021, and getting through to finalising construction and opening towards the back end of 2022. But again, that is tentative at this stage because you can appreciate we've still got some more final work to do. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much. That's good. Mark, anything follow-ups, or does that work for you?
No, thank you. Just on the environmental standards, let's go above and beyond the current standards. But excellent. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Leader. Julie.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I found the webinar we held in the consultation was a really positive experience, and it was really a model perhaps of how we can do things in the future in terms of engagement. But I wonder specifically, I think there was over 20 to 30 people that were involved on the night. And then you said there'd been a further set of people that had sent in comments. So you said that the designs had been changed over the weeks and months. So I wondered how the responses had been reflected in those changes in design. And I particularly remember there just being discussion about we need to make this beautiful. It was a former theatre. The stage door is important and significant for people of Colchester. We know that Charlie Chaplin is associated with the site. We know that Charles Dickens is associated with the site. And how, in terms of design, are we kind of protecting those historical contexts for that development? And finally, Chair, you know, we've got a really exciting opportunity here. We've had a very difficult journey in terms of the alumni application. We all know that. But I think this seems to be being received in a much more positive light. And the back of the development, and I'm not sure it's really come out too strongly in terms of what we've had to say tonight, will become a new social space for people in terms of the cafe and bar facility in that locality. And if we've got good access, as we hope to have, from the car park and Priory Street car park, we could actually see a really good social buzz around the locality, which will help all of those businesses around that area of Queen Street. And I'm really hoping that we are able to persuade CELEP to finance this, because I think this will be a good news story for Colchester.
Thank you, Judy. For my part, absolutely, those sentiments are shared, as will be by all of us. And we don't want to sort of say thank you yet before we are successful, but we absolutely are grateful for the opportunity to secure support from CELEP. Matthew, is there anything that you'd like to add? I mean, the points made are extraordinarily well made, and I'm grateful for them, Judy, because you were alongside us when we had that lengthy and quality discussion with leading lights, if you like, and interested bodies and people, and we came away thinking, well, we learned from that, we benefited from that. It's nice to hear a measure of appreciation and a sort of a positive response, but that's not the only reason we did it. We did it because we genuinely wanted to hear, and it was great that we did hear, and we did, as I say, we did some learning. Matthew, is there anything you'd like to bring out in response to Councillor Young?
Just very briefly, thank you, Councillor Young. So in terms of the sensitivities of the scheme and how views have been incorporated, that's more really a question of softening the design of the aspect, particularly at the front, so it blends in with that conservation area. So more use of brickwork, a more sympathetic design that matches the surrounding buildings. I think your second more important point was about interpretation, the former uses of theatre, recognising that we will incorporate that. So there will be interpretation, there will be kind of a nod to the fact that it was a theatre in the final design and in the kind of in the interior of the building and how that gets carried through. So yes, we will do that.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Teresa Higgins.
Yes, I'd like to add to that. Actually, Julia's said much of what I'd like to say about interpretation, but couldn't we go also one step further? That if there is a Roman road underneath or anything Roman that turns up that's quite nice, could it be seen through the floor as it is in first sight? And even if there isn't that much to see, at least put lines out to show this is where the Roman road runs underneath it, because it's the one thing we're always accused of, that you don't see enough of our Roman ruins. I mean, we know that, we've been recycling before it was invented, so most of the Roman brick is in our castle and our churches, but here's an opportunity to open up a site so the people could still see it. And I think maybe whoever takes over the cafe could be encouraged to also, maybe if they got Roman bits, or to use the theatre bits as well. I think we got a great chance. I mean, it looks a fantastic scheme, and opening up a walkway there on the level will make things nice for the public in general, and to restore that frontage, which people complain about us getting planning permission now, but how they got planning permission to knock down that building and put pretty grim bus garage entrance. That was for councillors in the past, but let's try and turn that around and make it so it's a good frontage that reflects the past, and shows the lost theatres, because I think at one point there was a sort of mini plaque on it, wasn't there, that's saying one of the lost theatres of Colchester. So it's So thank you to the officers for all the work that they've done, and let's make sure that we actually get all those bits and pieces into the planning application so that it can be presented properly to the planning committee on the 4th of March. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I'll ask Matthew to take those points away. There are different ways of doing this. I think the most important piece, I think, was when the webinar and I think subsequent exchanges showed absolutely commitment on our behalf, the council's behalf, the architect's behalf, and those providing a comment that, you know, what we should do collectively is ensure we did reflect the history, and that includes the history that it was a bus garage. You know, that is also part of its past. It may or may not feel more attractive, and there's only so many images of a bus. Some might say we want inside that, in the inside of that dwelling, but in that working space. But there are ways of doing this in a tasteful way, mindful that it has to work as an integrated whole. We're looking for a building, as was mentioned on the night when we discussed this, and tonight again, that has some beauty and style to it. But no, thank you very much. I think that's absolutely rounds out the conversations we're having tonight, and we've had before tonight, about doing this with, as I say, a little bit of sensible panache, you know, blending in, but also with some distinctive features, but deeply honouring the past. And as to whether we can dig down and find anything other than more stone, others better than I will be able to say, but perhaps we can mark it. And maybe given our holdings in the museums, though we might be able to have some of that history which is hidden away, not on view in this, in this site. But those are details, Matthew. We'll leave them to you. Unless you've got a further comment, I'll go back to Councillor Corey.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Mark.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on the sort of aspects that Julie expressed so well, and then Teresa backed up too, because I had so many other points. I didn't focus on that as much, but there is such a fantastic history about this place. And I think the way Julie expressed it, the buzz that could be created, this could be a real social point. And I really hope to see that, and its links with the other developments nearby. Charlie Chaplin, what a fantastic character to have had here, and Dickens. And yeah, there's a social commentary there. There's a culture that goes beyond just history, and John Ball Square as well. I want to understand that's about social history. That's about socialism. And it's about actually understanding that getting people together, especially after this COVID pandemic, is how I think that collectivization, collectivism, there's something about that. And I just want to get not just the history and the heritage and the culture, but the culture of that culture, and see if we can bring that in somehow. I do think there's something there really rich about it. So not just sort of a superficial nod to the theatre or whatever. I think it really needs to run through the project. And I think that happens with the through walk and the social aspects, as Julie's tried to suggest at the back. So I just wanted to back that up. I think that really could bring it all to life, and it's something that Colchester, I think, will really like to see and feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm sure Matthew's got that, and we'll make sure that from tonight, some of the key messages, they are a reinforcement, I think, but it's useful to aired them, and then Matthew can pass it on to the architects and design team. Their responsibility is to integrate all our enthusiasms and passions, socialist or otherwise, a leader. And personally, Charles Dickens, is an interesting example, isn't he, of a man of stature in every sense, who with a conscience, and that's what we might hope we also aspire to. So, Matthew, more than you can ever deal with. Good luck with taking all of that to the architects, but they showed a listening ear, and I'm sure that there's a place for at least the essence distilled from our observations between us tonight. So thank you very much indeed. Any other questions or observations from any on the call, including the strategic director, if he wants to add anything? Oh, Councillor Mark Corey again.
Sorry, I've just got a few councillors who are messaging me whilst watching the meeting, which is a good thing. That's engagement.
That's great.
Some of our group, David, were asking about the planning, but asking about some of the plans and sharing those. So I think that as we go, as you've said, Matthew, the more plans, the better, to bring people in along with us on the story and the journey here. So I think people are really interested. So if we could share those, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corley, for making this a live session in every sense. And to all those out there watching, that's fantastic that you are. And thank you for the instant feedback being passed on. My recollection, Matthew, from the earlier walkthroughs with others, is there are other images that make up the design. So certainly we can look to see whether we can't, as part of our communications, make sure that those are, all of them are available, but with the qualification we just had, which is that there has been adjustments in some aspects of what we have, but adjustments for better. Ian.
Chair, Matthew's done an excellent presentation. The only thing I would emphasise is that the council has over many years sought to facilitate economic growth and deliver the best possible circumstances for job growth in the town and borough. And this is another example of what the council is doing. And I think at this moment in time, it just emphasises the importance of the role of the council in seeking to stimulate the economic recovery in the town of and borough of Colchester, which we know is suffering because of all the impact of COVID locally as well as nationally. So it is an excellent proposal, and hope it gets the support it deserves from the other funders.
Thank you very much indeed, Ian. And really, it's a point I would have wanted to make, and will, as if we close, if there's no other, let me just check, any other observations or questions, then of course would want to take them now. If not, then I'll just close from my part by sort of thanking everybody for the contributions tonight, those from a distance through the leader of the council, and those who contributed before we meet today to take decisions that I'm hoping that we will in just a moment. All of that contribution, all that engagement is really valued. But the piece I wanted to end on was really yours, Ian. You know, the regeneration, you will know better than anybody, given your career and where you are now, and knowing Colchester so well. It takes many years. The nearby site of Lumno is, of course, still very contentious, and we're 16 years on from trying to market it. It's a good illustration of just how painful a journey it is. I think, thrilled is the word what it is, that this does not have that degree of contention. It is widely supported. It is not controversial. The designs received very little critique, at least that I saw or heard since. You know, it's the whole motives for this as well have had widespread support, in particular by this really important sector of our jobs market and our local economy, the creative and digital sector. This will unblock the chain of transition from a startup through to for some a more significant business. That's really important, that we remember that we're not doing this just because it will turn another part of this old street into something yet more attractive. We're doing this not just because, although that matters too, that gives us access through to Roman Wall and the squares out the back. Those are fantastic reasons to be attracted by what we have. But this is regeneration for a purpose, for employment, for the impact that then has on other lenders and funders and their decisions. And it's the power of the public purse, you know, persistent work, listening, revising plans, listening to SELEP, listening to local residents, and adjusting and tuning a design, and 80 odd jobs plus those in the transition to, if this happens. All of those will matter, and in small ways it will matter also to the wider shops and communities that will benefit from people in town going out there to shop, eat, drink and spend. And it's not consumerist, this real economic reality that with the pressures we've got, the timing is great. So my thanks again to Matthew and Ian and the wider team for all they've done here. Julie, before I close on this.
Yeah, sorry to delay the meeting. The thing that I remember, which I did mean to say, was when the waiting room was in existence, they had very successful bazaars, I think, once a month, where creatives could come together and sell things. And one of the things I think came up in the consultation was could there be space for, not only for the hubs to be working, in the offices and stuff, but the ability to, have some open space that you could actually do a little craft market if you wanted to, because we're, often being asked about indoor markets and stuff, and maybe there's some scope in this building to create something there in the more public areas of the building. And I just wondered if that had been looked at as well in terms of the design and capability of this building.
I'll return to Matthew.
Thank you, Councillor King. Thank you, Councillor Young. Yes, short version is yes, within the scope of the cafe and that precinct, which won't always be open. It won't, obviously it's open in the daytime, but in the evenings there is opportunity to do things with that space above and beyond it being a business space. And certainly that sort of interaction, that kind of how the daytime economy becomes the nighttime economy, and what that looks like. And yes, we're looking at that. I haven't got any detail on it, but we're considering it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy, for raising that, because it's something that other more difficult areas have reminded us of the importance. Rightly, we and residents place on publicly accessible public realms, open space. So thank you. That's a really great reminder of that, and it's again about good planning. If we do this job well and we're successful, we don't control the latter, and we just prepared ourselves well, then we gain a number of benefits, economic up the top, removal of the blockage for growth for businesses in that creative and digital sector, but also public space, public access, and a little bit of extra freedom of movement and experience. Thank you so much for bringing that out. That's really well done. If there's nothing else then from any, then I'll close the item by returning to the recommendations. Richard, if in good form you could put them up. They fit together. I shan't, I know we've been through them, repeat them all out loud. We'll take the vote on them as a package unless others would wish to do otherwise. So unless colleagues show, officers or members, then we'll take the decisions listed in 2.1 A to F, which embrace and include our commitment as a local authority to match fund or contribute in funding our desire to seek and therefore to make it enable the approach to set up formally and all that follows with that in terms of process. So A to F, Richard, would you administer the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just call out committee members and if they just say whether they're for, against or abstaining. Councillor Corey?
For.
Councillor Higgins?
For.
Councillor Young?
For.
Councillor King?
For.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody again. I hope those watching found that as interesting as we have done, seeing this come eventually to the top of the pile and good to go. I thank in advance Celeb, I hope, for certainly giving us the opportunity. Richard, we have a further appendix of not for publication paper which covers the detail of the financials. I'm content if colleagues are to just, as we can now, to take it without further discussion. If not, we will move to exclude. So are we content to take the appendix without further discussion? We are. Okay, thank you. Richard, that I think completes our business, unless you know otherwise.
It does, Chairman. That's everything that you needed to do.
Thank you very much, and I seriously thank everybody. We've taken our time walking through this, just the one paper, because of the importance. When the RIF meets again, we'll have other business opportunity to look at the overview of our new capital programme. I hope by then that will be worth bringing out for public awareness alone. I know some members have said how much they would welcome yet more airing, because we do publicise, or certainly endeavour to share what we know when we know it. But for tonight, there's one really significant component of regeneration, this part of Colchester. We've done it justice, I hope, building on what we've done before. And so my thanks to Ian, Matthew and the team, and all of you, and to Democratic Services as ever. Thank you, Richard and Matthew. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we won't go into the Teams meeting now.
Good night.
Thank you. Cheers.
No, we're all done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.